We may be tired of talking about the Great Resignation / turnover tsunami, but the fact remains that every organization is still dealing with the effects of an environment where employees have felt inspired to think long and hard about whether their careers match their values. Some professionals realized they were perfectly happy in their jobs. Some were comfortable in their organizations, but wanted real opportunities for professional growth. And some companies' most valuable employees decided it was time to see what else was out there. All of which has left many L&D teams with a realization of their own. To really be future ready, you have to take steps to keep the good employees you have and attract more people to fill the roles left vacant by the great change-up / the big quit. One of the ways organizations do that is by stepping up their talent mobility programs. That's the systems by which organizations match employees and their skills with the work that needs doing. The excellence of an organization's talent mobility program is a big indicator when weighing the success of their organizational design. It's no surprise then that it's a busy time for organizational design professionals like the experts on today's panel. We're lucky to welcome back Cheryl Jackson, PhD, GP's Organization Design and Change Practice Lead. For over 15 years, Cheryl's been supporting transformational efforts in Fortune 500 organizations across a variety of industries, including retail, manufacturing, healthcare, and food and beverage. With a doctorate in industrial organizational psychology, her focus is organizational effectiveness strategies, supported by organization design, change management, assessment and development, employee engagement, leader development, and performance management. As if that weren't enough, Cheryl also serves as a lecturer in the Master of I/O program at Texas A&M University. And making his debut on the Performance Matters podcast is Akash Savdaria, Vice President for Talent Solutions at PeopleFluent. Akash is an entrepreneurial technology executive with over 10 years of experience bringing SaaS products to market that solve real-world data-driven problems. He drives the business vision, growth, and strategy for PeopleFluent's talent products portfolio. Akash started out as a management consultant focusing on business strategy for multinational pharma and biotech organizations. Later, he was co-founder and CEO of Patheer, an AI-powered talent development and analytics platform that revolutionized the enterprise talent and career mobility space. When Patheer was acquired by LTG, our parent organization, he joined our sibling company PeopleFluent, and the platform became Talent Mobility. Akash has a bachelor's degree from the University of Arizona with, get this, a triple major in information systems, operations, and management. Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Welcome to the Performance Matters podcast from GP Strategies, your workforce transformation partner. In each episode, we'll interview industry experts and explore best practices and innovative insights to help your organization improve performance. Hello and welcome to the GP Performance Matters podcast. I'm your host, Michael Teal, Creative Director, serving within the innovation team here at GP Strategies. One of the side perks of my role is getting the opportunity to host this podcast, where every 2 weeks we interview thought leaders about a topic uber relevant to the world of learning and development. Give us a follow wherever you get your podcasts. I personally listen on the Apple Podcast platform, but hey, it's a free country. Today, we're talking about the very timely topic of, drumroll please, talent mobility. I'm joined here in the virtual studio by our esteemed expert panel, Dr. Cheryl Jackson and Akash Savdaria. How are you two doing?
So good, Michael. Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Our pleasure. So just for full disclosure here, Dr. Cheryl, you can't see this because we're doing a podcast. She is in her hyper-organized office And Akash, who's kind of like the Tony Stark of talent mobility software development, I think he's in his quantum accelerator. So he's got a little bit of that kind of echo going. So want to just couch that. So as you're listening to this, picture him with all kinds of beep, beep, boop, boops going around. And he's in this kind of accelerator tunnel thing right there. So my question for you two, before we get going into the meat and potatoes, is our listeners like to know a couple of fun things about our experts before we get into it. So Cheryl, can you start us off with just where are you in the world, and also one fun fact about you?
Yes. So I am in Texas, big state. So I'm south of Dallas, northwest of Houston, kind of in a little triangle there, east of Austin, Bryan College Station. And I am not good with heights. I have this fear that I'm just going to become like a leaf and like float over a bridge. But I have been skydiving, and I would do it again. Somehow that's not as scary as walking across a bridge.
That's a fun fact right there. I am impressed by that. And, given the concept of pre-records and audio recordings, I have let folks know that you are a guest lecturer instructor at Texas A&M there. So you are in a beautiful area. If we need some barbecue, we're going to come talk to you. And Akash, where are you? And one fun fact about you, sir.
Yeah, so I am in Seattle, Washington. And, what's interesting is I grew up my whole life in Orange County, California. And earlier this year, I moved to Seattle, Washington. And all that I've learned in the past 6-7 months is everyone here is super outdoorsy. And the one fun fact about me is, I've never rock climbed, but I think I am going to take an initiative to learn rock climbing, at least at the very introductory level.
We've got a couple of fun facts. You two, we are definitely on the mobility theme with you two here, in the air and on the rocks and everything like that. So yeah, through the magic of audio editing, our esteemed listeners know you two are heavy hitters in this world of thinking about engaging employees and providing the tools and resources. So Cheryl, I wanted to start off here really just talking about the fact that you and Akash had, I think as they call it in the pop music world, a collab recently where you wrote a blog post, and it was really about employee-led development. I can see you chuckling over there, so I know I'm doing a good job.
You were on fire today. I got enough.
My dad jokes are just killing it here. So hopefully my kids are not listening in another room here at the house here. But okay, so one of the things in leading up to this, you had mentioned as you and Akash were writing this blog post, is really that aligning employees' skills to job titles and structure. And I quote here, is the most important work organizations never get around to. So Dr. Cheryl, put on your professor cap here and tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah, and I think this was actually a quote that I was very happy to include. This was a quote from Akash that he shared with us in one of our early discussions. And I just love it because this is the work that I do. It's all about organizing and creating a structure for these companies to lay the foundation and the framework. So I say it's very much like you walk into a room and it's super messy and you say, gosh, I just need to start cleaning up this room. And so sometimes we start hanging up clothes and start taking our pencils and our papers and we just start putting them places because we just want a clean room. And it's like, great, now we have this clean room, but when it's time to go back and start finding things, we don't really know where we put everything. At least I don't, because I just wanted a clean room now, but I don't know where all of those things were because I didn't take the time to design it to be useful for me when I come back later to actually search for those things. So an organizer or a professional would come in and say, hold on, before we get crazy and just start putting things in different places, let's take a look at how you're going to use the space. Where do you like to work and where do you like to rest? And how do you like to organize and put things away? And how are you going to look for it later. And when it's time to clean up, how do you like to clean up? And they ask you all these questions that you think don't matter at first and slow the process down, but ultimately they streamline the process later. They create this structure and this framework. And that's what we do in organizations is we come in and say, how many jobs do you need? And what does the structure look like? And what job titles do you want? You can't just start offering, you get a job title and you get a job title, and what skills do you want to use, and what's a nice fancy title that you would like to have, because later they make no sense and you can't move people around. What's equivalent is a specialist on this side equivalent to a specialist on that side. Now they're making different amounts of pay. And how do you align that? Because it creates confusion. And then you have different sets of skills. And now we don't know how to train on those because there's no consistency, because we didn't take the time up front to establish something that made sense. And so just creating a little time on the front end to create this structure or this framework or an organization scheme that makes sense saves so much time on the background. It creates an opportunity for clarity, visibility, and structure that makes it actually usable on the back end.
Well, Dr. Cheryl, I have to say a couple things here as kudos for you. Number one, you did your academic best. You did a proper citation early on there in terms of honoring Akash with the quote. So well done with that. I love the fact that you also brought in a very layman style analogy for what could be a pretty complex topic here. So I'm loving where your head's at there. There's so much to unpack in what you've said here. So Akash, we're going to turn to you here in the Quantum Accelerator. So putting on your software development hat or your architectural engineering hat here, what I want to ask you is, how would we build out career and skill paths / skill requirements in something like a talent mobility tool to enable people to discover and understand skill gaps for leadership roles? And I say this because we don't always know what those skills are. So what's your take on that?
To be very honest, the stuff that Cheryl just spoke about, it is really paramount for an organization to have a solid job architecture, or you can call it career architecture and skill taxonomy in place before they even think about talent mobility. And for the same reasons, right? It provides more visibility for the employee to understand from a career planning perspective, right? What are the jobs that they should be aspiring for? What are the skills that they should be developing? It provides that common blueprint and language when they're thinking about career development. So I want to start off by saying it is very important. In terms of how to develop it, I think, from my experience working with, large enterprises, there's a couple different ways that organizations are solving for developing a career or job architecture. I think one of the common that we have seen is an organization might go out and purchase maybe an off-the-shelf career framework or a competency model from, a third party. It might even be personalized right to their industry. The challenge is we're living in a really agile world now, right? Skills are changing, job titles are changing in industries. And you might purchase a competency or a career model, but it'll very, very quickly become outdated, right? After, a couple years. So you're constantly, purchasing something off the shelf, right? And It's not always 100% personalized to your specific business. So that's one option. It does exist.
Okay. What are some other ones?
Another is many organizations start the process of building it themselves. So there might be an in-house team. They might be, going around, speaking with managers, interviewing folks, and trying to build a competency and a skill framework that's very, very personalized to them, right? It's great, but two things, right? One, it's super time intensive, right? It goes back to the quote.
You're talking about like a DIY approach here, right?
Yes. Yeah. totally done internally in-house by the organization. But again, it's very, very time intensive. Two, it's something, if you're living in this agile world, you're going to constantly need to update, right? And still keep fresh. So the last approach, which is one that I like to recommend to organizations, is, looking at their career framework and their skill framework as an agile, always fresh data set that they can manage. And nowadays, when you're, looking at talent mobility software, you're able to look at, within your particular industry, how jobs are changing, how skills are changing, and you can have the ability in real time to start building that architecture and tweaking it as you see fit. And I think that's the direction, as we look at the next couple of years, more and more organizations are going to be moving towards.
Well, I will say this, Akash, I'm glad that there's brilliant architects and theorists like yourselves thinking about this, because, this is something that you just described two polar opposites. One is you just buy off the shelf frameworks. One is I can imagine somebody sitting there with Microsoft Word and staring at a blank sheet and going, okay, what's, starting out with those competencies. How do you keep that up to date in an agile world? And what I'm hearing you saying is talent mobility tools that incorporate that type of AI, market-driven type elements are going to keep you up to date and get you a head start on that side. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's pretty much it. Yeah. Instead of having a, off-the-shelf product or even an empty canvas to start with, having the right talent mobility software technology, they won't completely make your job obsolete, but they'll definitely improve the efficiency for the way that you can manage skills and manage job titles, right, across your organization.
And also having the right partner. So when you have a customized approach, you're not just looking at a blank Word document. That's what we're here for. Industrial psychologists such as myself, this is what we live for. We look at these frameworks and these structures and say, what do you want it to look like? We guide you through that process. And so you're not alone. At least that's the ideal. And, many companies have teams like that. When I was an internal consultant, and that's what I did for my organizations. And, we customized our own work all of the time. And now, with GP Strategies, that's what we do for organizations, is say, what are your goals? What are your values? And let's design the words that you want to use. But there are companies that offer those. And that's where, it's that plug and play approach that he's talking about. But through the system, it makes it very nice to pull kind of this hybrid approach of what's out there. Let's customize that and put it together. And it makes it real nicely. And that's where this fancy collab comes into play.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We layer those two together. And it's just so nicely, because it takes the pressure off of that blank paperwork, which who starts with a blank page? That is so hard.
Well, what you two are talking about is really the value proposition of the merger of GP Strategies and the Learning Technologies Group, is that you have true deep expertise on the service level, personified in this case by Dr. Cheryl Jackson, and then brilliant product development, learning development focused, talent focused products like Talent Mobility, part of the People Fluent suite here. So it's really a great mashup here. So I want to turn back over to the over on the side of thinking about this from the industrial and organizational psychology side, Cheryl. So what I want to ask you is this, speaking about employees planning their own strategy. So putting this on you here. I know you've been on the podcast before. And by the way, a little plug here for Dr. Cheryl. If you haven't listened to either episode 71 about agile change management or episode 76 on continuous learning, I would encourage you to go back, scroll through theirs. Dr. Cheryl has been on here. She is a fantastic guest here. But back to the show here, Dr. Cheryl. I know that you're a strong advocate for setting up employees for success. I love to hear that as an employee myself. So we've talked a bit about how infrastructure and organizational design play a big role in that. but how do smart organizations expect their employees to contribute to their own development?
Yeah, from our employee engagement research and the clients that we work with from our engagement surveys, it has been proven time and time again that employee development, that opportunities for career advancement as well as growth opportunities just continue to show that those are primary drivers of employee engagement. And they're two different things. So not everybody wants to advance, but everybody needs that growth and development. It's also critical for overall health and well-being. It's going back to positive psychology and all of these different aspects, they're just critical factors. And so many employees often think the manager should continue to grow me, right? They want me to grow. Not necessarily. Managers, especially in these times of saying, you need to do more with less, managers are strapped to do more with less. And why? Unless I'm an incredible manager who sees the power in developing employees, which we know not all leaders and managers are just really, really good. I want to hold on to my best employees because I'm bonused and advanced based on how much I can produce. And as good as I am, I'm still tempted to hold on, right? So it's in my my interest to say, I'm going to own some of my own development as well and continue to grow and advance. And these organizations that can support and say, we're going to continue to support our managers and continue to help them grow into the leaders that we want them to be. But in the meantime, employees, it's your role to own your career advancement and your development. And we're going to give you the tools to be able to do that. We're going to create visibility across the organization. We're going to say, here are the learning materials that you can have. Here are the skills that you need for all of these different roles that you want. They're at your disposal. Take a look at them, dig into them. And our talent strategy says that if there's a job that you see that you want, we support you as an organization. Your leader is going to support you because it's part of their process to support you. All of our procedures, our culture, all of that works together to help you manage and own your own career. And what that means is that employees, they need to understand their own goals. So often we say, manager, what's next for me? Do you see me developing here? Where do you think that I can grow? And we don't know what we want as employees. Someone says, where do you want to be in 5 years? Whatever makes the most money, or wherever this career path takes me, or whatever opportunities are available, right? We don't really know a lot of times, and it's dependent on the company, but we need to really look within ourselves and say, what are my goals as an individual? How do I want to make money? How do I want to support my family? How do I want to live my life and grow in my humanity as a person and in my professional career? And then voice those goals, tell your manager, and then start asking people how to get there. Talk to other people in your company that have those jobs and those positions. Start making connection with those. You don't have to stay within your own function. Go get coffee with someone across the hall, with someone across the department. Talk to those leaders. Ask questions of those managers. And then start developing both inside your work and outside your work. Start volunteering with other organizations or other nonprofits that can develop those skills if you're not getting them at work. No one said you can only professionally develop at work. There are opportunities to public speak in other arenas. There are opportunities to grow. Use all of those to your advantage. Your manager's role is to start clearing barriers and to start making connections for you and to start helping you brainstorm and to think through and to see things that you can't see. The company's role is to establish a culture that allows for you to own your career and create visibility through tools and platforms and processes that allow you to take control of your career. And if they're not doing that, then everything breaks down. You can't say you have an employee-led career plan and then say, but we have no visibility for you, or we're going to put barriers in your way. And so it really is important to have those things in place if you're going to say that we support this. Otherwise, it all falls back onto the managers and the HR teams.
That is fantastic advice. And I want to just stick on this question for a moment and turn it over on the system side, Akash. So for you, we've heard a lot of the great advice from Dr. Sherrill. Can you share a little more insight on how the actual tools, talent mobility type tools, could help facilitate these best practices and tips that Dr. Sherrill has just spoken so elegantly about?
Absolutely. So what I have noticed is a lot of organizations, we get the same feedback that Dr. Sherrill just shared, is the number one reason, a lot of employees are leaving organizations is just lack of awareness, right, of career advancement or career growth opportunities. They just don't know where to go next. And when we go and dig deeper with clients, we often uncover a consistent theme. A lot of them are saying, their internal job board is falling short. So for the longest time, they had been using the internal job board to say, hey, here are the list of all the open positions. If you're ready for a career move, go ahead and apply. But the internal job board doesn't help an employee with long-term career planning, right? You don't, as an individual employee, you don't know all of the unique job roles that exist within the business today. You don't know, what to strive for, what skills for those roles should you be even thinking about developing, right? And then how do you develop those skills, right? That's where talent mobility software can come into play. They can actually empower an individual to say, hey, based on where you're at today in your current role within your company, here are other roles that exist, regardless of whether there's an opening or not, right? It's still creating that transparency to the individual employee of where they could potentially go. And then the big kicker there is show them skills they should be developing and provide them with the right type of developmental recommendations. That developmental recommendation could be, a project that they could take on part-time to develop skills. It could be some learning content or a learning path that they could pursue, maybe potentially even mentorship, right? All with this, career plan in mind that, hey, I can unlock these different job roles if I'm working on these skills, right? And that truly is what career engagement is. And that is, has been time and time shown to be a critical driver of talent retention. People are longing to learn new skills, unlock new opportunities for themselves. And if they're not finding it within your organization, they're definitely going to be looking elsewhere. In fact, there already are.
Yeah, I was going to say, just looking back on my career, I'm now in my late 40s. Hopefully I have a couple more decades of professional work in me here, but just thinking about everything that you both hit there, where you look at a job board and it's really more by accident that maybe you go, ooh, that's something. And then, you might look at it and go, wow, I don't have those skills. And you almost feel sometimes disengaged by that. Versus what you're saying is almost like a Netflix approach, Akash, is based on your current role, here are things you might be interested in. And, then as Dr. Sherrill was mentioning, here's best practices and pathways and skills to get yourself there where you can see a path forward and you're excited and engaged about being with an organization. So I think that really boils down to this word of visibility is kind of what we're talking about here. So can we talk a little bit more about that? Like, why does this concept of visibility matter so much when it comes to successful talent mobility strategies?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on what you were just saying about that Netflix board. And this is what I talk with my students about all the time in their job searches, and say, we get so stuck in what we think of as, say, an industrial psychologist, because these are what my students are. And we think consultant and specialist in learning and development and org design. And we're using all the terms that we know. And then we talk to someone and say, wow, you have my background, but you're doing that? I never would have thought. And so now we have a new keyword. And so we have this ongoing list of keywords that I keep. And I'm like, looking at all these keywords and job titles that people with your background, look at all these things that they do. Would you have ever looked at these job titles and searched? And they're like, oh my gosh, I never would have, because I would have had no, quote, visibility to that until you shared that with me. And so what's so powerful about getting out of your own head and like using a tool like this, where we take all of this information and really get out there and say, look what others are using and how we gather that information. And managers and recruiters do the same thing when we're writing a job description. Okay, so I think I need this skill, and I think I need that skill, and I think I need this experience. We're putting down what we think we know. And a lot of people have no idea what an industrial psychologist does or what, but they do a lot of different things. And so they would never think to put that down there. And so therefore it never gets on that thing. And so we create this pattern of just the same people in the same types of jobs. But once we get in communication with each other, it just opens up a whole new world. Same thing with the tool. You put it out there and suddenly we realize how many opportunities they are out there. You do that within your own workforce, and you're creating this entire ecosystem of where your employees are growing at massive rates. You don't have to go externally because your employees are exploding with opportunities, and you're trading them and growing them, and they're just so happy and engaged in their own place of employment. You don't have to be throwing massive amounts of money at them. I mean, they're going to be growing exponentially because they're actually moving into roles and developing their skills, but you're not having to beg them to stay, and you're not having to hire outside and raising for these hot skills because they're seeing opportunities. They're gaining these skills, and you're using the skills that you already have available to you that you had no idea existed within your own walls of your company.
Yeah, it sounds like, and I will say this, that you really are kind of describing in my mind this light bulb moment. And I'm sure this is, Akash is going, yeah, that's why I developed the software in the first place. But this idea of you're going from relying on serendipity to find an exciting career path to an actual strategy, not to do too many puns with GP strategies here, but an actual roadmap that's intentional, that's architected, and with a software that helps actually facilitate and inspire the process. So, as kind of a Luddite there, I want to say I can see it all coming together now. So well played on that side. If we want to break this down here, so, I'm kind of from the sales world, and one of the things that we think about is this concept of a value proposition. Okay, so trying to talk about everything that we've talked about thus far, but boiling it down into here, if somebody is got one of those too long didn't read type mentalities, if we had to boil down the value proposition of talent mobility tools, I want you two to take a crack at that and see if you can parboil it down to a couple of tight little statements.
I think when we think about value proposition for talent mobility software or any of the topics we just talked about, right? Job architecture development or skill development, it really is formulating a strong partnership, a mutual partnership between the employee and the employer. And when we think about the employee, the value proposition, if we go back to your earlier point on visibility, I think for the employee, it's a sense of ownership, right? It's, hey, you're a vital asset to our business today. We are going to unlock a career journey for you within our business by providing you this tool. This tool will allow you to truly understand where you stack up today in your current role, your current skills, and we'll walk you down a road within our organization where you're going to be able to unlock and have an opportunity to try out new roles, understand what skills for those new roles you want to develop. Maybe you don't want to develop some of those skills, but at least you'll have that transparency, right?
Right.
Which does not exist today for the individual employee. Sometimes, your manager could be the best manager ever, but even your manager might not know all the opportunities that exist across the business, right? And the larger the business, the harder it is to discover that. So I think for the employee, a good analogy sometimes I try to think of myself is in our personal lives, non-work lives, we have apps like you just mentioned, Netflix or Amazon, that are constantly telling us, they're learning from us, right? They're learning from us and saying, hey, based on what you've purchased in the past, here are other great products we might think you're interested in, right? And they may or may be interesting to you, but they're trying to get smarter over time. Same thing with Netflix, right? When they're recommending you movies. The value proposition, when we go back to talent mobility for the employee, is exactly that. An organization can understand that employee, start spoon feeding the right type of career paths or skill development goals to that employee and give them the option. Again, the option is in the power of the employee of, do they want to take their career in this direction or not, right? Now, the second, the why it's a mutual partnership is by the employee having access to this software, participating and learning about opportunities and developing skills, this data is extremely valuable for the organization, right? As an employer, as a company, when I have frictionless access to skills of all my talent, understand where they're thinking about taking their career, you can now augment your existing succession planning efforts, right? You might be putting people into succession plans where you might not even know if the individual is interested or not. But by having the right talent mobility software, you can see what the employees are actually interested in and make sure it's in alignment with your succession plans. From a competitive or workforce intelligence perspective, you can see when you're thinking about your 3 to 5 year business strategy, right? You could see, do we have the skills today in-house that are really required for us to compete, right, in our industry? Where should we make the right investments when it comes to learning and development? Where should we be thinking about our talent acquisition strategies, right? Where should we be recruiting for the right roles because we might not have the current skill set in-house? So I think that is really when we bring in the value proposition, it really is mutual. You're giving optionality and empowerment to the employee on their career. But for the organization, it really is about having access to data and making sure that you're making the right talent investments, right, to compete in your industry as a whole.
All right, so you two have really made a case for the value proposition of talent mobility. And I'm going to say this, that for me, it really boils down to values. I mean, you can put a bunch of mission, vision, value statements on a website or give people out little clips that say you value them and their growth. But it's another thing entirely to set up a system, to set up technologies and tools in place that really facilitate this process. So I'm just going to put you two on the spot here and say, okay, I'm personally sold on this. I love it. If I was an organization that said, I like talent mobility, I'm excited about it. Akash, as a developer of this type of tool, what's the first step for an organization?
I think this is where I'd like to honor Dr. Cheryl here on our podcast. You know, it really does start with having a very structured and defined job architecture and a skill taxonomy for your organization. That is very, very important. Now, we talked earlier in our session, you know, there's several ways to do that. But org design is a very important element to enable talent mobility. There is also, in parallel to that, the appropriate change management that needs to be enabled across your business, right? Managers should be trained to have appropriate career conversations with their employees as you're thinking about bringing in, you know, a talent mobility software into your business. You should also think about, you know, structural policies and procedures. Some organizations have restrictions. For example, an employee can't move into a new role until 24 months has passed in their current role. So, you know, in today's world, you know, how should you as a business maybe think about changing those sort of protocols and enabling people to move into different opportunities sooner if they really are equipped and ready? But, you know, change management, org design, job architecture creation, the work that Dr. Cheryl has been doing for quite some time, that has to be thought about first, because talent mobility software, especially the stuff that I was sharing, the recommendations, the constantly feeding the employee new ways to grow and develop, it all gets powered based on this data that the organization has built, right? Along with the cultural change that it has created.
Dr. Cheryl, as at least your third time guest spot on this session here, I'm going to give you the last word. Any final thoughts on this topic of talent mobility that you would like to share with our global listening audience?
Yeah, I'll try to get back away from the passion and back to the academic side. But when we talk about visibility, it's so critical in so many areas, but clarity is critical for alignment of priorities and purpose, which helps us align our roles in order to contribute fully and to be productive in our role. And productivity and satisfaction equal engagement. Engagement equals productivity in the organization, which is money, right? That's what the organization wants. And then employees, we want that deep sense of engagement and meaning in the work that we do. Now, from that framework standpoint of actual alignment with organizational goals and objectives as an organization, are we meeting the goals that we want to? And do we have the workforce to get that? Are we setting ourselves up for success now and 50 years into the future? We can't know that unless we are looking at what we are establishing and through our hiring practices and our development practices. And so we have to establish that up front and then be able to track that and measure that and update that. And so many of our organizations, all the ones that I was a part of are included, we are doing this very important piece of work on Word documents and Excel documents housed on individual computers or shared files. How hard is that to update and maintain? And the organizations that we're working with now still say, we do that functionally. We do that based on teams. Everyone is different, or we have an enterprise-wide function, but they're housed within, our teams page and things. That's so hard to maintain and update. And where's that common library of skills and things that you're updating and things that you're monitoring, and how do we know what we're tracking to? It is so hard to maintain. And so having visibility into that, even from an enterprise standpoint, just to say, what are we tracking to? If we continue down this path, what does our workforce look like 10 years into the future? It's so important to see if we're moving toward those strategic goals and objectives to help the organization meet those. So are we doing our job? That's really important to strive for. So from an organizational standpoint, as well as an individual employee standpoint, both sides, this checks those boxes. This
has been a fantastic conversation. You've shed a lot of light on both the concept and the value of talent mobility. So Cheryl, of course, you've blown me away as always. So for our listeners, again, I want to encourage you to check out the past podcasts, but also Cheryl's an active contributor to our blog posts. You can visit us at gpstrategies.com and check out some of our thought leadership there. And Akash, it's been great having you as a first-time guest here. We hope that you'll come back in the future.
I would love to. Thank you for having me, Michael.
Of course. So Akash, where can people find out more about the talent mobility platform and what you're up to?
They can find out more about talent mobility by going to peoplefluent.com and looking at our talent mobility product. There's plenty of content out there that we put around talent mobility. And we are also working on some other exciting developments across LTG when it comes to talent mobility, specifically with some of the work that we're doing with Bridge that we would be happy to share with folks that are interested in.
Love it. And that sounds like potentially a future podcast topic. So on behalf of our many listeners, thank you to the both of you for sharing your insight today.
Thanks for having us, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
The Performance Matters podcast is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can subscribe to the show anywhere you get podcasts or listen on our website at gpstrategies.com. The Performance Matters podcast is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can subscribe to the show anywhere you get podcasts or listen on our website at gpstrategies.com.